Hey, greetings, everybody. Peter Maravellis here on behalf of City Lights Booksellers and Publishers and the City Lights Foundation. I'd like to welcome you to City Lights Live, our virtual reading series that follows in the footsteps of our in-store calendar. We continue to feature the works of authors we know and love through readings, discussions, and forums moving toward the summer season. As always, we are beaming to you from the unceded ancestral grounds of the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples, also known as the San Francisco Bay Area. We'd like to take this moment to acknowledge those who have come before us as stewards of the land. So tonight, City Light celebrates Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Our program is called Hybrid Liminal Diaspore, featuring two amazing poets, Barbara Jane Reyes and Rajiv Mohabir. They will be exploring the poetics of cultural heritage and making critical inquiries into the complexities of identity in a world in flux. How does one navigate diasporic spaces in a period of hyper-acceleration and while experiencing a collapse of traditional markers? What is the role of poetry in the emergence and realization of genuine agency, the building of community, and the quest for justice? These trajectories are just a sampling of the areas of the work that our poets address. So Barbara Jane Reyes is the author of numerous books of prose and poetry. These include Letters to a Young Brown Girl, Gravities of Center, and her most recent, Want a Peek into My Notebook, Epistolary and Lyric Essays, which is her seventh book and is published by Paloma Press. She is no stranger to City Lights. We've had the honor of publishing her book, Invocation to Daughters, as part of the Spotlight Poetry Series. We've also featured her many, many times on our calendar. So very, very, very happy about that. Barbara is the recipient of the James Laughlin Award of the Academy of American Poets and the Global Filipino Literary Award for Poetry. She makes her home in the San Francisco Bay Area. Joining her tonight will be Rajiv Mohabir. He is the author of 3 acclaimed poetry collections. These include The Taxidermist Cut, Cowherd's Son, and Cutlish. Cutlish was a finalist for the 2021 National Book Critics Circle Award for Poetry. His hybrid memoir, Antiman, is finalist for the 2022 Penn Open Book Award and winner of the 2019 Restless Books Prize for New Immigrant Writing. It is a great honor and a pleasure for us to be able to host Barbara Jane Reyes and Rajiv Mohabir. Please join us now in giving them a warm welcome. Welcome to City Lights.
Thank you so much, Peter, for having us. And Rajiv, I'm so honored to be reading with you. So when Peter and I talked about doing a kind of event for May for API Heritage Month, I was like, can I pick my co-reader? Can it be somebody from out of town? Can it be Rajiv? I mean, like, I don't think he's gonna fly in, but like, can we still Zoom? Is that how that's gonna go? So I'm very happy to be here with you.
Oh, me too. Like, what an incredible moment for me to, be here reading with you, Barbara Jane Reyes, whose books I've just adored for so long, and have been really instructive for me personally in my own journey through and into poetry. So what a complete blessing and honor to be here with you.
I'm so glad. Thank you. And yeah, I definitely want each of us to share from our works. And, I'm going to ask you a question later about, hybridity in language, and, which I would just love to, hear more of your work. But maybe I should start, I guess, right, with a couple of things from my book, Want to Peek into My Notebook, and then we'll go from there, I think, right? So I'll read a couple of things, and then maybe I'll just pass the mic over to you, and then you can do the same, and then we'll just open it up, if that sounds okay. Yeah,
that sounds so lovely.
Perfect. Thank you. So hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us, and thank you, Peter, again. As Peter said, City Lights has been hosting me for every single time I have put a book out into the world. And so when I was a little baby in this industry, they were so generous about opening up the poetry room space for me, and it has just been such a huge honor and such a beautiful poetic home for me. And this book, Want to Peek into My Notebook, is published by Paloma Press, and that is a press that is run by the San Mateo County Poet Laureate, Aileen Ibardaloza Casaneto, and really very beautiful work she does, and she's very just so generous with like opening up her space in the spirit of kapwa, which is a Tagalog word for a Filipino core value of shared humanity. So I I feel like just values wise we're so well aligned. I had asked her, I am a poet and I've got all of this writing that I've been doing, all of this kind of prose that I don't know what to do with it. Do you want it? And she was like, of course I do. And so, so I basically like went through about a decade of blog writing I had been doing ever since like my very first blogspot.com before I started grad school, and just, found there were actually valuable things that I had written there. So I was very pleased to be able to revisit kind of my old self in that way. So, and then some other random kind of essays that I say random, but they're essays that I have placed in all these other anthologies of writers looking for writings from Filipino diaspora or from artists of color in this country. And so this is an essay called To Decenter English, which is part of this collection from Wesleyan University Press, I think. Which, I apologize, I don't remember the name of the book, but Martin and Joseph Ponce had written this beautiful scholarly essay about my poetics. And I was then invited to also kind of write a thing about my own poetics. So To Decenter English. Lately, I've been asking myself, what would it look like to truly decenter English in my poetry? As is frequently noted about my poetry, it is multilingual, incorporating Spanish, modern Tagalog, and Baybayin, or pre-Hispanic Tagalog script, into its predominantly English poetic body. Incorporate indicates subsumption, assimilation into a dominant body. This is problematic and insufficient to me, as the body is still identified as an English one. Other non-English elements are viewed as ancillary and even embellishment. I used to think that not italicizing my foreign words in my poems was a form of dissent that would challenge the reader's assumptions of foreignness. I continue not to italicize, though these days I question whether that affects readers' perceptions at all. And so we must question English. A quick internet search will tell you that Filipinos have been ruled in English since 1898 and instructed in English since 1901. Question, though, whether Filipinos are fluent in English. What constitutes fluency? What qualifies as fluency, especially in a post or neo-colonially stratified society? Or whether Filipinos know enough English in order to mimic, but more so to be ruled and instructed, to execute basic commands. Question also, which English? Whose English? The poet Jaime Jacinto once used the term subtracted bilingual to describe people like us, our fluency in our elders' tongues disrupted by American education. Look up Taglish, code switch, but do not assume all Filipinos are Tagalog speakers. Question understanding, comprehension, readability. Question whose understanding, whose comprehension, readability for whom? I was raised and almost exclusively educated in the USA. I spent one semester at University of the Philippines at Diliman, and still these questions of language do pertain to me. For many of my parents and other elders' generations of Philippine immigrants, I have learned they never feel entirely at home in English. My interactions and communications with them exist in a perpetual state of translation, or in some kind of third space. We collaborate, oftentimes clumsily, in an effort to agree upon meanings. Much of our system of communication is comprised of gesture, tone, and volume. Mostly, we remain in various states of disconnect. Can my poetry ever reach them? And if not, then have I failed as a poet? In college, I took 2 semesters of Tagalog classes. While I would like to think of these classes helped me bridge some of this aforementioned disconnect, we also learned a formal Tagalog that felt socially strange to employ. Ikinagagala ko pong makilala kayo. I'm going to say that again. Ikinagagala ko pong makilala kayo. As you see, it's very hard on my tongue. For example, was not a phrase anyone I knew ever used. Perhaps it amused my parents to hear me say such things. They themselves would simply say, "Nice to meet you." In the 1990s, I was introduced to the songs of Quezon City-based songwriter Joey Ayala, who hails from the island of Mindanao in the southern Philippines, non-Tagalog speaking region. Around the same time, I was also introduced to the Philippine film Sakay, directed by Raymond Red in 1993. What struck me then was that the Tagalog of Ayala's songs and Red's cinematic dialogues was a Tagalog so poetic and deep, such words I'd never heard before. I wanted to use these in my poetry. They were so beautiful. But as my parents' generation were educated in English and had lived in America for decades, I learned I could not assume my parents could even access the meanings of such deep words. My father, whom I think of as fluent in Tagalog, definitely much more at home in Tagalog than in English, would say, "No, we never use those words. Those are not words that I know." Today, what it means for me to be stuck between languages and what it means for my father to be stuck between languages are two different.
Looks like Barbara may have frozen up. Barbara, can you hear us? If you can, would you maybe exit out and then come back into? Okay, there we go. You're back.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that. You froze for a second.
Sorry. So then we must question which Tagalog, whose Tagalog, and how thick and impenetrable is that colonial residue which has made Filipinos ignorant of their own mother tongues. Though to be fair, American speakers of various Creole Englishes experience alienation from standard, formal, academic, institutional English. I grew up in a household that spoke and or listened in Tagalog, Ilocano, and English interchangeably. Code switch is our real lingua franca. Addressee has always been a factor in
Hey, everybody. Could I get everyone except for Rajiv to turn off your video? Because I think that our bandwidth is being affected. That might actually help Barbara a little bit. Here we go. Sorry about that, Barbara. You froze up again. I just asked everybody to turn off their videos except for Rajiv. So maybe that'll help a little bit. Sorry about that. Let's try it again.
This is how you tell secrets. This is how you chisme, gossip. Perhaps this is why some monolingual folks harbor suspicion for those of us who must operate in multiple languages, who appear to flow unimpeded between them. What slippery motives we must have. What wily Filipinos we all are. To further complicate language, I know very few Filipinos and Filipino Americans who actually read Baybayin, which I had never heard or seen until college. My parents had never seen it either. It is, let's see, my parents had never seen it either. I never knew the Philippines had its own systems of writing, of which Tagalog Baybayin is just one. This is also colonial mentality, the uncritical assumption that the West brought us literacy and literature. A quick internet search may tell you that pre-conquest, Baybayin was written on impermanent materials such as tree bark and bamboo, and used for such things as personal letters and poetry. These days, Baybayin seems to be more of a thing to be looked at. We tattoo the symbols on our bodies, and so then we must translate our bodies upon demand. A colleague in grad school once said to me, "Don't use foreign language just because you can." And I swear I wanted to lunge across the table at him and sink my fist into his smug white hipster face for his tone of being inconvenienced. But it is offensive also to be told that it's as simple as writing in whichever one language I am most comfortable with, either English or Tagalog. That too tidy to be realistic or is what I resent. I'm constantly resisting, and ultimately I would like to decenter. And this is why my speakers and persona are constantly composing polyglot lyric, breaking and reconfiguring language, translating and mistranslating, forking their tongues. So I will stop there, and I apologize for having broken up so much. You never know the quality of the internet when you are in a hotel, which is where I am right now, in a hotel in Morro Bay, looking at a big rock out the window. But thank you so much for your time. I'm going to hand it over to you, Rajiv.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Barbara Jane. That was amazingly compelling. You know, as a speaker of Creole myself, I feel particularly seen by everything that you've said about like how the languages that we listen in and the languages that we speak, and what you said about the polyglot lyric around translation and retranslation is particularly making me very emotional, actually. I'm so grateful to you and for your work and for making space for people like me and work like mine. I'm going to begin by reading the introduction to Antiman, and then I'm going to jump right into a kind of translation that I've done to a classical Hindustani raga. So this is going to kind of like make a backdrop for you to understand the kind of linguistic recuperation work that I feel like my life has, that I was born for, actually. So in this memoir, I've changed many names, places, and relationships in order to keep the spirits appeased. Protecting kin is the work of the ancestors, but so is speaking truth. I have represented the emotional truths that have led me up to the present, this crucible of years in which I discovered the poetry that also discovered me. I've chosen the title Antiman, consciously aware that it is upsetting, that the term is a violent one. I use it in order to shift its heaviness and release the trap of its letters, to embody it with the flourish, despite those who would use it to condemn and to damn. Those who are not familiar with the Caribbean slur might hear it as anti-man, against man, which could be its own title. Another mishearing for the word anti-man, before man, is also apt. To my nibblings, I am very much anti-man, be I chacha, uncle, or mamu. The word anti-man represents and holds a history for me, one of migration and survival. This is my own accounting of events as I remember them. I was entrusted with my Aji's only possessions, her melodies and words in her dying language of Guyanese Bhojpuri. There were seedlings from India grown in the plantations of Berbice in Guyana and pressed for their sweetness in Orlando, Toronto, and New York. After her death in 2010, I was moved to collect what I could learn from her, and record and translate the songs that she wanted me to learn. All her life in diaspora, far from Berbice, my Aji songs were ignored. Her language and customs have died out with her, replaced in diasporic Guyanese spaces with Bollywood and other mass media. But in them, I found the queerest magic. She was born in 1921, was the grandchild of indentured laborers, and spoke as her first language a form of Bhojpuri blended with Awadhi called Guyanese Bhojpuri. This language, which falls under the larger category of what is called Caribbean Hindustani, is unique to her speech community and descends from North Indian languages, with words borrowed from colonizers. I was lucky enough to learn as much as I could before she passed. As I began to transcribe and translate her words, I puzzled over how to convey oral languages that change from generation to generation. Since so few people read and write in Guyanese Creole, in Guyanese Bhojpuri, I developed my own orthography for them. Inevitably, such an orthography and the migration of these languages into Romanization depends on one's individual language philosophy. When Aji sang, I heard grief's bitterness, bitter melon, tears, the stem of a mango leaf given to the bride to bite before meeting her groom, to remind her that separation from the family spells despair. Did Aji know that she too would be exiled from her own house, like me, in diaspora in her own home? She left me no guitar, no sitar, no flute, just these two hands and my tongue. If we forget our ancestors, they disappear, and then we disappear. I was born in an echo of forgotten songs, anguish of the lost, the kidnapped, the absconded. I was born to be cast out, turned away into night. I want to believe that her language, our language, is not dead. I began to write in this language only after my dreams delivered themselves in its musical grammar. I do this clumsily and as a student, with reverence and overwhelming thanks for my Aji. My Aja had a boat he named Jivan Jyoti, the light of life. The real light, though, is a kind of ship. It's a vessel that my Aji passed to me, singing. The strange little hybrid chapter that I want to read, after this brief introduction, is called Ardanareshwaram Raga, and it's a classical Carnatic raga that is performed here. I just sent a link of a performance that I quite enjoy of this. So check it out when you can. I'm going to begin with the translation of the Sanskrit lyrics written by Swami Mutush Dikshita. And then I'm going to jump right into the poem essay. And if you don't know, Ardanareshwar is the god who is half Shiva, half Shakti, half masculine energy, half feminine energy, and is depicted as such, as being half man, half woman, with a septum divide being the border. Or let's call it the ecotone. Line of imaginary. I bow to the Lord who is half Shakti, half Shiva, whom the sages Atri, Bhrigu, and Vashisht exalt. At midnight's half watch, their adornments are indomitable and ardent. Beloved of Ardanareshwari, they, benevolent, bestow fearlessness. Adorned by the serpent jewel, mounted on the bull Nandi, worshipped by Subramanya, praised in Kumada Kriya Ragam, extolled by the Agamas and in the Vedas alike. Their servants are devas like Indra. They shimmer a reddish sheen. Your father pulls over as you drive along the blue ridge. It's a black river. Wildflowers fringe the banks. You were on your way to some uncle's daughter's nikah, migrating from Florida to Toronto. On the radio, a 1960s Bollywood tape spins its tin and screeches. You step out and pick elderflowers and black-eyed Susans to tuck into your braids. Some things are unconscionable, your father says, like the liberties people take with their freedoms. Why can't we be whatever we want? The lyrics of your music are non sequitur, he says. Al Badinagit Wansins. Consider Ardanareshwara Papa. There is a goddess split down the center, right side Shiva, the left Parvati, whole. There's a universe in my throat. Nonsense, he says. Are you a god? You are not a mythological creature. It's Caravana in Toronto, and Sunnyman's Lotela beats its chutney soka. You've heard this song at family parties. The queer you're eyeing asks your cousin if you're single. That night you wear his oil for days. The first time you mirror someone like you are never lonelier. You hold your breath. Your face is red. Your family shifts. Never mind that when he leaves, you will clutch your belly. Walking in the plane cabin, he will not even look back. He will mount the steel and iron and sail across the sky. You will leave messages on his answering machine. Squeeze your lips tight whenever the phone rings. You will crave his mounting you. Somewhere is another kind of you. Crabbo Creek Wingawandem Pari Binakal Gurli. Hamne oki Gurli Bulawe Rahe Kahe ki U Kabole Ham U Antiman Rahe. He been love one ex-man from 79 village and all Bani Binasabi. Or Sadi Kare Biba time Biba Kare ke time Agail. The night before Ilawa, even take one bottle Maltion and sub piye. You know what? Jaharia, what them pregnant gal does take when he shame mumani pupa. Like when he get one piknini belly or saram lagela, then he go pee the whole thing and say, oh gado, hum apan my bap ke saram de dil. Well, girly ke papan nabin know his son bit a drink of jaharia. He carry him to hospital go. When them a buje de lawa, girly ke boyfriend bin come upon one horse and take him to the New Amsterdam side. Bad me, them been left mati and girly go back a papa house so biba kare. E time okar my bap okay jaharia khilawe rahe taki u girly ke maro tak le jaye. Aisan karis ke tu ki u na bhag sake or laiki se biba kare. Till now he married and he make picnic done and him stay at Wisconsin. In my village, there was once a man named Girly. We called him that because he, acted like an Antiman. He was in love with a man from 79 village and everybody knew. Come so, it was time for his marriage. The night before, he grabbed a bottle of Malathion and drank it. You know, the rat poison that pregnant women drink when they've dishonored their families. Well, the father caught Girly in time and took him to the hospital. Later on, they continued with the wedding preparations. And the night before the wedding, his boyfriend came and scooped him up on his horse, and they rode all the way to New Amsterdam. They eventually tired of each other. Girly returned to the village to marry the Dullahan. This time, his parents drugged him. This time, his father dragged him to the mandap where the priest started the havan and made sure that he didn't leave. He's married now with children and lives in Wisconsin. Mohini is Vishnu's only female incarnation. When the gods turn the sea of milk and the nectar of life emerges, the demons, the asuras, steal it. With quick fingers, Mohini picks it back from them. The master of tricks, she is the slayer of Bhasamasur. Once, when the demon who could turn others to ash with his hands mirrored Mohini's dance, he reduced his great form into nitrogenous dust. This is why there is immortality. One look from her eye could drive one mad. Once Shiva saw her, Kama clove his heart in two. The wild ache stokes a flame, her eyes bellows. Knowing her to be Vishnu incarnate, Shiva trundles the earth over, an elephant in heat, stamping through rivers and forests. In his whirl of desire, he spills his semen across the land. Bewitched by Vishnu on earth, the bewilderer of demons, the thief of immortality, the woman seduces Shiva. Ardanareshwaram is your household deity when you move into Jackson Heights walk-up apartment with your boyfriend. A mantra plays the first time you see the flat. It's your ringtone. Your mother is calling, Om Bhur Bhuva Swaha. If there ever was a sign, it's this. He is a drag queen named Lotte. His catchphrase, karma's a bitch. Interstitial, his transitions bore into bedroom politics, cocaine dancing and fucking with the wig on. Karma reduced you to ash. You open your blowhole and take him deep. Dolphins are prone to sexual experimentations. When he walks out, you call 4 guys you've known. You disappear into the dark water, brackish, mixing scotch with salt water. Thank you. And I think like I'll invite you now, Barbara, back up. Let's have a little conversation, shall we?
Nice. Yes. Hi there. That was beautiful. Thank you so much for that. Ugh, oh my gosh. So beautiful to hear. Um, oh my gosh, where to start? I would love to hear what other folks' questions are. But for me, I feel like, yeah, it is that Creole in your work that you know, has made me a fan of your work since I first found it online. And, you know, and I've brought your work to, you know, my Asian American studies classes as much as I've been able to bring your work to my MFA students. And, you know, the responses are always just the same in terms of, you know, the wonder about like, how is it that I don't understand it, but I understand it and I love it, though I don't know why I don't understand, you know, like I don't know why I understand it. So I don't know, I bring it up that way because I feel like Creole or hybrid language is something that is just, it is something that we all practice, and yet in our respective or many of our communities, it feels so invisible, right? So I guess I wanted to put that out there just kind of as a thought, and maybe have, you know, see what your thoughts were on that as well.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Well, thank you for that question. Yeah, and thank you for teaching my work, Barbara Jane. That's amazing. Thank you. That means so much to me. I think that, like, you know, all my life I've been told that the Creole that we speak is broken English. Like, you know, our very beings, how we understand ourselves, how we like understand the world or the world around us, and the various worlds that we live in are profoundly whole, whereas we as the experiencer are fractured and fragmented, that we can't be whole because of the fact of this Creole, because the big divide between the proper and right way of speaking. Like, you know, they call it proper English sometimes, but like in my family, they called it right English. Like, you know, and that's something that has long haunted me as, you know, a writer. And now what does that mean for me in the United States? You know, my grandmother didn't read and write in any of her languages, but that didn't mean that she wasn't a keeper of literature or of tales and songs and stories. And that was like particularly meaningful to me all my life, to see the queerness of not fitting in, you know, as immigrant, but then also like my grandmother not fitting into her like educated family. And so this is a kind of model for me. And that particular thing I wanted to read because, you know, mostly we think of, or, you know, when around the issues of queerness, when my father found out, he was like, oh, we never should have left Guyana. We never should have done this. But I wanted to actually take the queerness and the sex with men, or men having sex with men relationship back into Guyana and back into that Guyanese space of this language, you know, where we actually do have language for it. And that's kind of what I was thinking about that. And I think like for you as well, I was wondering, you know, you say a lot about alienation in Creole, and I think that that's particularly moving for me. And I think that, you know, when it comes to poetry and like kind of like polyvocality or multilingual poetry that's written, you know, I feel like there's so much space and elastic that the poem has. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your experience writing the poem, and then your experience with this like hybridity of form with this new book into prose, and what that has meant for you. I mean, spiritually, psychologically, but then also like poetically or artistically.
Wow, yes, thank you. Thank you for that question. There's so much there, right? And you know what? The first time I read from this book was for Poetry Flash's Watershed Poetry Festival. And immediately I was struck by the musicality of it just being different, you know, and it was just not something that I could, I wasn't fully comfortable with it because I've been doing poetry like just so, you know, for so long, and I'm used to the kind of music that I can make with lines, and just line breaks, and with prose, it's a completely different animal. So I was like, wow, I can't keep up with this. It was just, you know, so it was weird because for me, poetry is so much about breath, right? It's so much about breath and just making the music happen. You know, with just every single bit of punctuation and every single, you know, bit of sound that you can. And then for me, prose is not that way. And you know, and for folks who actually write prose, you will probably tell me differently, but I'm not there, right? Because poetry has just kind of been, you know, that thing that I'm so comfortable just getting my hands into, right? You know, and so, but I also feel like, you know, particularly with my last collection, Letters to a Young Brown Girl, you know, I always these striking, like strong ass Pinay images on the covers of my books. So I have to show them off because this woman is an Aswang. She's a monster. And then this woman is a killer of men. And so, but anyway, like you know, that was mostly prose poetry. And that's you know, that's something that I'm very, very accustomed to. And I remembered Seshu Foster did a poetry event at City Lights, and he was saying, you know, the thing about writing prose poetry is that I just didn't want to be cute with enjambment anymore, right? Or just in general, I just want to be able to just have these lines, right? So, so for me, like, I guess, you know, I'm still kind of trying to figure out if writing prose is something that I can do, and that everything is probably going to always kind of tend towards, you know, poetry, even if it does appear as prose. So there's that. And what was the first part of your question? Oh my gosh, I don't remember.
It was around the multilingual writing.
Yeah. Yeah, that really did happen. That thing about, you know, somebody in my classroom, one of my colleagues saying, don't use foreign languages because you can. And yeah, I did have a violent kind of response to that, because I feel as though using quote unquote foreign language or not using the English language properly was something that I would get punished for if, you know, socially or academically, and then in the home, if you know, if my use of language wasn't proper. It was something that my father in particular was just so very sensitive about, right? He hated hearing us use slang when we were younger. He hated, like, you know, because there are these perceptions of, you know, us as immigrant brown kids, you know, I grew up in the 70s in Fremont, where there were very few Filipinos. Now there are Filipinos everywhere in Fremont, but prior to that, I felt like there weren't very many. And so for us to go out there using quote unquote bad English was not something that he wanted reflected on us, right? So yeah, I think on all sides this hybridity was looked down upon. However, experientially, that was what was always spoken in the home. So I was always confused by that. Why are the rules different out there? So when I bring that into my poetry, I do feel like I'm doing something that is the most natural thing. But it is also the most natural thing that is constantly being punished or shamed one way or another. You know, and so, and we have a term in Tagalog, hiya, right, shame. And to be without shame, walang hiya, is like, you know, well, it's oh my God, to be shameless, clutch the pearls, right? And so when I'm writing, I feel like that is the kind of, you know, what I'm going for, I guess, is that, you know, like, unclutch the goddamn pearls. I mean, like, just, this is how we speak. You go out into the world and this is what you hear. So why are we constantly acting like it doesn't exist, or it is, you know, this kind of, this thing that would make you a pariah, right? So yeah, for me, it definitely does have a lot to do with kind of fighting against, you know, even my own parents and my own elders, you know, kind of expressions of this shame that they themselves held, right? And you know, perhaps.
Yeah, you know, Barbara Jane, I think you're frozen on my end, but I want to respond to quickly what you said about shame. You know, shame is so incredibly powerful also for me and my family, and like, you know, our kind of like shame around language. Oh, there you are. And shame around like feeling that shame. Like I was just saying that I totally hear that in my family too, around language, around food, around, pretty much everything, every aspect that's like incredibly the deepest part of who we are, but anyway, you were saying.
I don't remember. I think it was just about that shame, right? The shame that we all hold for the thing that we do every day in the privacy of our own homes, and then put on our best kind of proper English attire to walk out into the world, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I live for that. The idea of like writing a book is like bearing your shame to everyone. Oh dear God, you're telling these secrets? Oh no. Like, why
Yeah.
don't you write in proper English? When I gave my father like the first chapbook that I'd written, I had a lot of Creole in it. He's like, I wish I could have marked it up in red pen and sent it back to you. It's like, wow, that shame is so profound.
Oh, shameless. Oh my goodness. And I see a few comments coming in here too. So I'm very happy to see some questions. I think the first question from Nancy was for you, Rajiv, the sound of Creole. Do you see that question?
Oh, yes. What was the mix of languages in the Creole again? Okay, so the languages that form the Creole. So the English Creole that we speak is African derived in Guyana. So it came from the contact between the enslaved people of West Africa and the slavers who were British. And so there's actually a lot of Dutch in it as well, because the Dutch were the original colonizers of South America before it was like sold to the British. And so in our Creole, we have it's English based or pidgin English based. It's been regularized into a first language, so it's more dexterous, and it has elements of Dutch, Portuguese, as well as North Indian languages and South Indian languages. So the particular North Indian language and South Indian languages that my family has spoken historically have been Bhojpuri, Awadhi, and Tamil. And so these languages also kind of find words into the Creole itself. The colonial history of Guyana was such that in the 1800s, after the British had abolished the international slave trade, and this was 1834, Britain turned its greedy eye to the jewel in its crown, which was India, and they reinvented slavery, calling it indentured labor, giving people contracts that they could get out of, which they couldn't really get out. I mean, some people actually did get out of it, but it was a stacked deck, let's just say. And they're taken to Guyana and to all over the world, actually. So wherever there was colonial holdings, Fiji, South Africa, Mauritius, Reunion, and the Caribbean, Jamaica, Trinidad, Guyana, Suriname, and I want to say Belize as well as Guadeloupe. And so this is that history, that we are descendants of those indentured laborers.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. Stelina's question for both of us: does your personality change in different languages? I like that question because, as I had said, I feel most at home kind of in the in-between. So, I'm very, very conscious of where I'm using proper English and, who it is I am speaking to, and it is a tool and a weapon. So that's how I view, proper English as a tool and a weapon. And, how it has been weaponized against us, is this also my weapon walking into the world? Possibly. But I know that if I am operating in that in-between space, hence the liminal, right? It's a beautiful poetic word too. I remember somebody had asked, like, poets, what is your favorite word? And Jason Bayani and I were like, liminal. But just always kind of in that, space where my dad was speaking Tagalog and my mom was speaking Tagalog and English and Ilocano at the same time. And, my younger sisters who were born in this country have, limited understanding of Tagalog and Ilocano. And the Tagalog I learned was like poetic and formal. And my parents are like, the hell are you saying, right? So, because it's not a language they speak either. So I feel like my personality is always going to kind of tend towards, the kind of tension that I'm comfortable with in that middle space. So that's me. I don't consider myself like a, fluent in formal English, although maybe I am, but I kind of I tread carefully in it.
I like that. English as a tool and a weapon.
Mhm.
It is wielded like that, and it has been for ages against people who have been like colonized. I think that like for me, when it comes to my personalities in language, I think that like clearly I'm more fluent in English than I am in any other language, but there's like a kind of home language that I'm fluent in as well. And like that Rajiv is like not Rajiv at all. He's Remy. You know, it's like he has like a different kind of personhood in the home space. And so, yeah, and I think like maybe you heard it a little when I switched into reading Creole. There's a different bodily orientation. Sense is constructed in a completely different way. If you're not emphatic with your voice, then you're not really speaking Creole, you know, at least in my experience of it. And so, yeah, I'll say that, and I'll say that it's a different, it's not so much that I'm a different personality or have a different personality, but rather it's a different set of relations that, you know, I find myself like plugging into or not plugging into. But that's such a good question. I think like the standard Hindi, and that's a language that I've studied. I would say that like if I do have a personality in standard Hindi, it's one that is very reticent, who's very ashamed of not being, you know, not knowing proper Hindi. And so there's that part of it as well.
Yeah, I think that's the same for me in Tagalog, right? My Tagalog is not something that I would consider fluent in speaking. And when I do trip over a phrase, so many of the elders are so quick to correct me. You know, the accent is on the wrong syllable and you know, whatever, you know, like, and I'll say something that I think I'm getting right. And, you know, I'm so accustomed to hearing, you know, the elders kind of cluck their tongue at me because it's not coming out right. So, you know, just language is just hard, period, right? And speaking more on language, from Nancy, I'm wondering about Spanish as the first colonial language in the Philippines and how that affects my writing. It is there. You know, modern Filipino incorporates or has incorporated a lot of Spanish words. Maybe Tagalogized the spelling, and you know, maybe the meaning is just a little bit off. There is a poem.
I wish I could help with the answer. But Barbara will come back. I mean, it's been a pattern. So
And different things, right? So the contexts change. I'm very wary of that when I'm writing, and you know, you know, lived in the Bay Area most of my life, and so I'm conscious of the Spanish being spoken around me, and always kind of wondering if I have the right meaning for the community that is speaking it. Do I know that Spanish? I don't think I do, but so I tread carefully around that. But I will use Philippine Spanish. You know, in my work. And actually, I use Philippine Spanish really for understandability, if that even makes any sense. I know that when I was working with Garrett Caples on my previous book, Invocation to previous book, Invocation to Daughters, Garrett is a City Lights editor, you know, and he was like, it's up to you how much you want to translate or not translate. You know, and so I looked again and I said, you know, there really is a lot of Tagalog here. That is the kind of Tagalog that is not natural to me or even to, you know, folks like my parents. So I would bust out the Filipino Tagalog and translate the Tagalog into the Filipino Tagalog of Filipino Spanish, so that, you know, perhaps that would be something if you heard it out loud as a casual reader here in the Bay Area or in this country, you might recognize Spanish. I don't know. I'm not sure you do. I know when I was at, I did a reading with the Academy of American Poets. I read from Poeta in San Francisco, you know, for the Laughlin Award ceremony. And I read a poem entirely in Tagalog, and everybody looked just so bewildered. And it was like, this is not something, folks do not know what this is, right? Luis Francia, he just kind of said, I think they might think that you're speaking a dialect of Spanish. I don't think they're registering that you are speaking the language of our islands, you know, so I was like, it's possible. I don't know.
Wow.
Weird. You know, so, but, you know, I mean, like, for you to explain the complexities just of, you know, yeah, it's where do I even start, right? I'm so tongue-tied even thinking about, like, you know, I think from the outside, people will say that's Indian, and you're like, which exactly, right? So, yeah.
Totally.
Oh my gosh, let's see. Oh my gosh, more praise here. Thank you. I love comments of praise too. This is making me very happy. Thank you, folks. Is there anything else? Does anybody else have any questions? I've been in a car in 100-degree weather for the past 4 hours, so I'm a little bit like, yeah, I'm a little scattered, but thank you so much, folks, for being here with us and asking questions. And Rajiv, thank you so much for sharing from that beautiful work. I've got Antiman sitting in you know, on my bookshelf, just I'm ready to devour it. But I love also when you're saying auntie, man.
Totally. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. My goodness. And thank you for reading from your work. It's so wonderful to hear and to feel, you know, as you read your work. It's just so incredibly moving to me always, Barbara Jane. And I'm so grateful to be in conversation with you too and to read with you. This is like a dream come true for me. So,
oh my gosh, yay. Thank you. So Peter, I think you're back. Thank you,
Well,
Peter.
that was such a thoughtful discussion and an evocative set of readings. I'm ever grateful to you both. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Rajiv, for this gift. And ever grateful for all of you for coming tonight. And, you know, I can't wait for the day when we can actually do this in person. I really missed out a lot, so I do regret that, but still grateful that we can do this. So thank you everyone for joining us.
City Lights has always just been, yeah, you know, when I was a teenager coming up to City Lights, I was always like, someday I want to be here. So I'm just always so grateful that you open up your space so generously to us.
yeah, mad praise and thanks to City Lights. Y'all are amazing. Everything that you've done. Such a fan.
Well, we hope to do this again soon someday. Be well, be safe.
Right. Thank
Cheers.
you again, Rajiv.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh. Bye, everyone.